Good day. Godzilla was one of the media titans that I, like many kids of the 90s, grew up with. Godzilla was a giant monster that crushed the building and wasn't afraid of anything. Not even the icon of sin. No joke, the Big G even took on Satan himself in a comic. Let's face it, big monsters that kill or crush stuff is fun to watch. Yeah, Gojira was all serious and dark and brooding, but you know what? Just a few movies later, it was all about the crushing and less about the nuclear bomb allegory. As a kid, I grew up watching all of the old Godzilla movies on the Sci-Fi Channel, and looking back, I have to say that I found them to be boring right up until the smashy. In the year 2013, the greatest kaiju film of all time was released, Pacific Rim, a film that would go on to become my fourth favorite film of all time. It combines the greatness of giant monsters with the epicness of giant robots. The plot was actually good, and the characters likable. In short, like Iron Man on Roboroids. That same year, I had a fever, and the only prescription was more Kaiju Bill, and I found it in the guise of Project Nemesis, written by Jeremy Robinson. So, you got giant monsters. They're cool, right? But they're limited by budgets and render time. Well, in a book, you can have a giant monster hang around for as long as you want, because there ain't no graphics budget, unless you get as big as J.R.R. Martin, and then you regret making a battle too big. Project Nemesis was not the first kaiju novel that I ever read, but it is, as of today at least, the best of the bunch. The absolute cream of the kaiju blue. Someday in the future, I will review an unofficial Godzilla novel that comes close to Project Nemesis' quality, but that will have to wait for another day. Project Nemesis is a novel wherein you have a giant monster and it smashes the shit. The end? If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Okay, I guess I should go into more detail. The writing is pretty bloody excellent, and there are numerous compelling viewpoint characters ranging from a national security agent to random people that encounter the monster, and the monster itself is actually a viewpoint character as well. The monster gets a tragic backstory and has you almost feeling sorry for it right up until it gorily eats someone. This book has essentially the literary equivalent of vor. Thanks for that viewpoint character that describes their experience of being dissolved in the giant monster's stomach acid, Jeremy. I really needed that kicking around in my brain 7 years after I read this fucking book. The action of the novel can be a bit hardcore, so if you are squeamish, be warned. Jeremy Robinson, in all of his books, pulls no punches, and he shows what kind of damage a big-ass monster could do. The novel has some really good pacing when it comes to the monster itself. When the novel starts up, the monster is only mech-sized, and grows throughout the novel to be about the size of Heisei Godzilla. The main viewpoint character likens the foul beast to the size of a couple of 747s. Robinson could have just created a generic monster on the loose plot, but instead he crafted an entire urban fantasy universe, and he even throws in a few ancient conspiracies, corrupt government officials, evil generals, and a twist that I did not see coming that makes the end of this novel rather memorable. All told, this is an Alpha Prime level novel. However, I personally don't like it at Alpha Prime levels due to the highly detailed and, to me personally, really gross violence. It is effective and memorable writing because I can still remember all these gory and violent scenes 7 years after reading the book once, but I really don't like reading chapters wherein a moderately sized monster buzzsaws their way through a small town, and we get passages about heads being torn off and guts being spilled. It's just not that pleasant to me. The novel does have its heroic moment, so it's not all decapitations and disembowelings. There is a scene just as the rather diminutive monster first comes onto the scene, where a woman uses a 12-gauge shotgun to fight the monster, but since it's a Jeremy Robinson novel, she only just dies fighting it. The characters outside of the monster are sadly a bit forgettable. They're not anything special, but they're not annoying either. In the end, I highly recommend this novel if you have a strong stomach for blood and gore on the floor, and if you like it enough, there's an entire series of books set in this universe. Hell, this book would get so popular that Jeremy Robinson would tie in other disparate stories to the Nemesis universe. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I am General Lotz, wishing you good nights and good killing star or whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing you this great content. Quite likely everyone already knows the twist, but in case you didn't, or you just want me to talk about it, Project Nemesis would later become Project Mago, or the Mago Saga. Who's Mago, you might ask? Well, Mago is one half of the Nemesis creature. For you see, Nemesis is one half murdered little girl and one half god of destruction, and they're on a collision course with wackiness. This was actually a pretty bloody imaginative origin story for a giant monster, and much more complex than mutant lizard, or he just was really, really big. And I think it's pretty bloody cool and adds an unforeseen emotional dimension to this novel. And Mago actually gets her revenge at the end of the book. She smashes through a couple of cities and eventually finds her murderer, which just so happens to be her father. She grows some giant wings, not to fly, but to literally focus sunlight to vaporize the bastard. She then just kind of wanders off and the novel ends. The main viewpoint character of the novel talks about how crime is down because everyone's afraid of the giant monster. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. There is also another sequel hook wherein an evil general is now turning into part kaiju and has some kaiju eggs, setting up the next book in the series, which features cat girls.